Hello and welcome to Web Development 101 with Alex Merced. On this show, we'll talk about all the basic concepts of web development in a way that anyone can understand, whether it's front-end web development, back-end web development, and full-stack web development. If you're new to web development, I recommend listening from episode 1 to understand all the concepts from beginning to end. You can also learn more about my own personal projects over there at alexmercedcoder.com. Thank you.
Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and you're listening to another episode of Web Development 101. And today what I want to do is just focus on HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. So the first episode, we kind of laid out the big picture, sort of like how the computers talk to each other, what does HTML do, set up sort of the structure of the page, which CSS does, sets up the visual, and JavaScript kind of sets up all these sort of interactive and dynamic elements. When we're talking about sort of front-end, client-side website rendering, okay? But I want to focus on each of these technologies and just kind of talk about them. So for today, we're going to be talking about HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. And it's really simple because HTML isn't like it's a markup language, not a programming language. So it's not so much you're telling the computer sort of take these actions, more you're just saying, okay, these bundles of content fall under this category, which then the browser treats differently. So in HTML, everything is called a tag or an element, and they're always kind of surrounded by those sort of two sort of V-shaped brackets. And if you've never learned HTML and want to learn HTML, I highly recommend General Assembly's sort of free sort of CSS, HTML, JavaScript orientation. It's like 5 lessons, but if you complete those 5 lessons, you'll actually have a pretty good understanding of all 3 technologies at the end. That pretty much kind of venturing off into any other area, whether it's self-taught or taught by a school, you'll have a pretty good foundation for kind of getting into any other area of web development. It really kind of lays it out. It kind of assumes like you know nothing going into it. So if you do know something, it's going to be kind of, the first couple lessons will seem a little slow, but it really kind of builds up your knowledge. So I highly recommend that. You can get to that by going to dash.generalassem.ly. So it basically kind of spells out dash.generalassembly. But again, those last 2 letters, ly, that's the domain suffix. So dash.generalassem.ly. But basically the general structure of an HTML page is, and I remember when I first learned HTML back in sort of like the early 2000s, late 90s, I mean, basically you just had your structured basic tags. Basically you had an HTML tag, and that HTML tag's function is it tells the browser this is a page written in HTML to interpret everything on this page or in this document as HTML. And then you sort of, oh, okay, so I'm going to treat these like HTML tags. And then you would sort of break everything down into sort of 2 very big sort of high-level tags. There was your head tag and your body tag. Now, your head tag basically had a whole bunch of stuff that you don't print on the web page. It's sort of where you put all your settings and whatnot. That was one way to think about it. So in your head tag, you would have a bunch of, and always kind of think of it like a tree. So basically the root of the tree or the trunk of the tree is the HTML tag. And then you have 2 branches, body and head. And then within the head tag, you then have a branch of a bunch of other tags that you would use for different things. So one would be title. So as you notice, in your browser window, whenever you go to a website, there's like a little title to the website that's in the title, that's like kind of in the top of your browser window. That's where they get that from your title tag. Then there was your meta tags, which aren't quite as much of a thing anymore. Meta tags are still used for certain practical things, but once upon a time, search engines were not as smart as they are now. So in your meta tags, you would put like keywords and other types of search-related things, because what would happen is that the search engine would look at your meta tags to determine what your website was about, and then that's kind of how the search engine would determine, what website should show up at the top of the search results. So search engine optimization was all about sort of your meta tags, and did you set up your meta tags? Did you set up that stuff so your search engines can figure out what your website is? But the problem is, then people kind of gamed that. They started, stuffing their website with meta tags and weren't related to what they were doing, or and they said this made search results not that great. So eventually, Google and many other search engines got smarter. They started doing much more semantic and using other factors to determine whether a search engine, what sites should be at the top of search results. So now it's less about your meta tags and more about like, do other websites link to you? The actual content on your website. So it'll actually search your content on a website and try to determine sentences and kind of determine whether it's what it's related to, and a variety of other factors, like how long people spend on your website. So like Google will actually track, like if someone clicks on your website in a search result and then they hit the back button like 5 seconds later, okay, that will hurt your search results in the future, because that's a signal to Google, oh, okay, this is not a website, the person didn't find this to be an answer to their question. So this website we shouldn't put so high next time. So it's a lot less, so you talk to a lot of like really, really people from back in the day, web design, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, your meta tags, but they're not so important anymore. But there's a variety of different meta tags and meta information you can put in there. So there is things that are still practical to do. Then there is and nowadays you usually use your head tags for linking a lot of your style sheets and other things. But basically the head tag is sort of all the behind the scenes stuff. Where all the fun stuff is in your body tag. Okay, your body tag basically contains all the contents of the website. And what happens is that HTML has gone through several like sort of editions. Okay, so basically, if I forget what the name of sort of the parent markup language is, but basically HTML was sort of a subset of an existing markup language, and then that's been developed over the years, and so with new standards. So in the most recent release, HTML5, okay. In HTML5, they release sort of a lot of new semantic tags. So these are tags that they don't actually change how your website looks like or how the website behaves. They're just there to help you break down sort of what the content on your website is. So that way, when someone looks at your HTML code, they can be like, oh, okay, so this is where all the sort of the top stuff is. This is where the bottom stuff is. This is the menu thing. This is that, because the names tell you what it is. So this includes header, not to be confused with head, which is where sort of all your top navigation stuff should go. And then within your header tag, you can create a nav tag for navigation. So that way they can tell within your head tag, where's your navigation. Or have a navigation section anywhere on your website. And then there's main for your main content, aside for like a side menu. And again, the tags don't actually do anything. So you could technically put these tags in there, and it doesn't mean this stuff's going to be at the top, this stuff's going to be at the bottom. It's merely for making the code more readable to know sort of what the intention of the author is. So that's why they refer to as semantic. It's just a language thing. Now, important things to appreciate that I wish I appreciated a lot more earlier is that every HTML tag generally can either be an inline element, which means it's just treated like a letter inline. So basically, for example, when I type a sentence in, let's say, a Word document, an inline element would just be like me adding a letter. So if I type star, I type S, and then T comes right after S, and then A comes right after. So those are inline letters. But sometimes if I add a picture, depending on how I add that picture, the picture might go right next to the letters, or the picture might drop below a line or two and be separate. So it becomes its own block. So everything in HTML could either be an inline element or a block element, which means it creates a sort of its own container. And basically, so if I were to type in some text and then use something like a P or paragraph tag, which is just a letter P, that's a block element. So basically what happens is that if I type this is the, and then I type in the P tag, and within the P tag I put cat, it'll be like this is the, and then you'll see it sort of break to another line and say cat. And any code I put within the P will be sort of in that sort of block. It's like an invisible block per se. So you have to think of when you're programming a website like blocks, and where do I want my blocks, and then use appropriate tags. So over time, before even they came out with the semantic tags, they created 2 tags to sort of help break up sections of your website, especially for styling, that are block or inline. So if you wanted to have a block of content sort of separated from everything else, you would use a div tag, a div, meaning a division of the website. Or if you just wanted to kind of say, hey, this piece of text should be treated differently, but I don't want it to break onto a different line or a different section. I want it to be part of the current block, but I want to kind of denote that this word or this sentence is special. You could use a span tag, SPAN, which is just an inline thing. And if I remember correctly, I think all the semantic tags, the header, main, side, footer, they're all block tags by default. Okay, most of the inline stuff has stuff to do with sort of text. So this is like your text, your B tags to bold stuff. Although they came out with a new one, I think it's like M for emphasis, which does the same thing. It bolds the text. It's just they kind of want you to bold the text through style sheets. So they try to discourage you to use all these styling type tags. So really, you're just kind of creating your content, putting everything in div and span tags within the semantic tags, and then going to CSS and deciding what all that stuff looks like. That's sort of the goal. Now, in any HTML tag, you can put attributes. So that would go within the tags. And that kind of tells stuff. Okay. Nowadays, you don't put too much in there. Once upon a time, you used to do all your styling within the HTML page. So I'd be putting in like, this is going to have a width of this is going to have a height of this, it's going to be this background color within the tag itself, and it was called an attribute. Nowadays, usually your attributes consist of IDs and classes, which are identifiers that then CSS or JavaScript can call and then do stuff with that section of the website. So for example, if I were to create a paragraph and I want to make that paragraph have a blue background and white text, I could put attributes that do that within the div tag that I use to separate that paragraph, or the p tag that I use to separate that paragraph. But then I have to do that for every page of the website because it only does it. So what I could do is instead create a class attribute. So do like class equals paragraph, or an ID equals special paragraph. And the difference is that an ID you can only use once. So you can't use the same ID on multiple elements. So usually you use an ID when it's something that's unique. While class, you can use something like, if I know all paragraphs are going to look the same, then I can just use the same class for every paragraph. So it'll be like class paragraph, class paragraph, class paragraph. And then I can go into my style sheet and then style it from there. So that is sort of kind of how HTML has evolved to now. But again, at this point, I really recommend that you go and try out that sample. It's free online course at dash.generalsm.ly. It's a really good starting point. Literally anyone could start there and have a pretty good understanding of this stuff by the time they're done with it. And on the next episode, we'll talk about CSS. So I'll talk to you guys then.